and welcome to another episode of FooBar. In today's episode, we are going to get in the depth of Amplify and AppSync transformers. If you want to know more about serverless, cloud computing, or software engineer practices in general, subscribe to my channel in the red button below. I post videos on Tuesdays and on Wednesdays, so let's get started. This is another episode on This Is Not a Podcast, and today I have a very special guest. I have Nader Dabit. Nader is the developer advocate for Amplify and AppSync, and as I have talked a lot about this, we are not covering the basics today. We are going to a very specific topic, that is the transforms that you can do with Amplify CLI on your AppSync. All the power you can do, how you can model Dynamo tables from there, and how you can leverage very interesting queries and very powerful things. So please join me in the interview. Hello and welcome to another episode. Today I have an amazing guest. I'm super excited to talk to Nader Dabit today, developer advocate for AppSync and Amplify, two of my favorite products in AWS. So welcome, Nader, today to This Is Not a Podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I've been watching your videos for so long, and I've learned a lot from you. So I'm glad to be here to kind of contribute to some of the stuff you're doing.
Yeah, and I've been watching your content for a very long time. So I'm going to learn a lot from your session today. That's the nice thing of doing these interviews. I always learn so much. It's a very selfish thing.
Well, it's great to be here.
What are you working currently? What you're doing?
So I'm a developer advocate, so I'm doing similar stuff that what you're doing, and I think that because of everything happening with the coronavirus and the travel restrictions, I'm doing a lot less traveling, which gives me a lot more free time to do other stuff. So I'm still doing events. I'm still doing all of the content creation and videos and all of the things that we typically do, bringing feedback to the engineering teams. But one of the things I've been working on lately is just contributing actually more time to helping with the documentation. We were talking about this earlier, just kind of improving our docs, because I think now that we're becoming like more of a mature service and set of tooling, we're not too worried about awareness anymore. We still have some focus on awareness, but now we're just trying to make all of the people that are already using it, more happy about just improving our docs, because people are hearing about it and they're coming there. So we want to make sure when they come to our docs, they have a good experience. So I'm spending a lot more time writing documentation lately, which doesn't sound very fun, but I enjoy it.
I've been spending a lot of time reading your documentation, so I'm happy that somebody's working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Amplify documentation is kind of nice because it's not the typical AWS documentation. So I like the approach that it took.
Yeah, it's easier to contribute to also for not only for us, but for customers, because they can just submit a GitHub issue or a GitHub pull request. And if we want to merge it, we can just merge it, and we don't have to go through any other third party or friction to get it done.
Yeah, because Amplify is open source. That's the main difference.
Yeah, so it's nice.
That's a nice thing. You can have GitHub issues and all that stuff that maybe in the normal AWS products is not as open. But
exactly.
That's really nice from Amplify that everybody can collaborate. And I imagine the people can submit also code improvements and things that they would like to see in the library as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people submit issues. They submit pull requests not only to the docs but also to the code, and often those things get merged. So if you have an idea or something that you think that you can do yourself, we're always welcome to those. But if not, you can always just submit the issue and we can try to put it into our roadmap.
Oh, that's super cool. So everybody listening, now you know. So today we are going to talk a little bit on maybe a little bit advanced topics on Amplify and AppSync, because I have heard quite a lot of introductory talks about this. And one thing I was mentioning before is I think a lot of people think that these are just to build prototypes. And I think the more you learn about Amplify and AppSync, the more you realize that they are really interesting pieces of services and software and framework that you can go from start to end with it. So I would like to have a discussion more on more advanced topics for those people that are maybe going in that journey.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think that the further along that we get with Amplify and the better it gets, it just starts becoming, more of a project that you can stick with, that you don't have to kind of leave once your app gets more mature. I think that there's always going to be different use cases and different things that people want in their app, and as you kind of start looking at the AWS services, and then you start looking at ways to manage those services, whether it be CloudFormation or Serverless framework or Amplify. Each one has its own feature set, and the feature parity is going to differ between the two. But I think as we add more and more stuff to Amplify, people are sticking with it longer and pushing it to production. And we even have ways to use like escape hatches. So if you need to add something that isn't part of Amplify, you can write some of your own CloudFormation. But yeah, I think I would say our goal is to make it to where you never have to leave Amplify. So that's kind of what we hope to achieve.
Yeah, but I kind of think that in real products, very big ones, or in companies that are using all these things, they can mix and match all the tooling, because at the end of the day, it's all CloudFormation, and you could have your main stack maybe built by your operation teams using CloudFormation. Maybe your backend, if you have a serverless backend, can be used with SAM or things like that. And then maybe your interfaces to client applications can be using Amplify and all the tooling. So I don't see why one or the other. It just depends on how you're building your software, or if you're a smaller company that you can put everything on Amplify, sure, you could do it, but you don't need to choose one or the other. I think it's the best tool for the right problem.
Yeah.
And regarding of that I said that that's a question I get quite often. So what happens if you have a backend that it already exists? So it's quite normal that you have a backend team that do all the data sources, and you have even microservices. How you can get started with Amplify?
So I guess there's a couple of different ways to look at that. I guess first of all, let's say that you have a backend that is using infrastructure as code in some way, like SAM or serverless framework. And what you might want to do at that point is, start just interacting with that application from some type of client application, a web app or a mobile app. The one thing you can do is just use the client libraries. You don't actually have to use the CLI at all. A lot of our customers are actually doing that. They have their backends deployed via some other framework or in some other way, and they just use the client libraries to interact with those existing backends. Then you have customers who want to start integrating, their services with the Amplify CLI, and they want to kind of take an existing, backend, and they want to start adding new features to it via the CLI. You can do that as well. In the configuration on the client, you have this call amplify.configure, and you can pass in basically a map or an object with all of the different resource locations, key value pairs. And what you would end up doing essentially would be to kind of use the configuration that the Amplify CLI gives you, and then you would then append all of the other resources that you already have to that. So you could basically kind of bring in all of the resources you already have, start adding additional via the CLI. Those are kind of the two main use cases, I would say.
And in the second way, for example, if you already have a CloudFormation stack that you have deployed, I don't know, a SAM project, and you integrate it into your CLI, will it kind of, what happened with that CloudFormation stack?
Oh, so you wouldn't, it would be, I would say, well, there's a couple of things that you could do. First of all, one use case would be that you don't ever use the CLI to interact with that existing CloudFormation. Or if you would like to, you can actually configure your CLI project, your Amplify CLI project, with custom CloudFormation, that you could literally just take your existing resources and plug them in, and then start adding additional stuff to it. So you could actually take that infrastructure as code, plug it into to Amplify and continue on. And that would be kind of like, I would say, an advanced, like a quote unquote advanced use case,
Yeah,
because you actually have to understand CloudFormation. But I think if you already have CloudFormation written, you already understand it anyway, so it
yeah,
shouldn't be too
exactly.
big of a deal.
Yeah, because
I
I've
think
been
like when
doing
I say
the
advanced,
first integration. That one I knew, but the second one is new for me.
yeah, I mean, and when I say advanced, it's more like we have a very wide array of types of developers that we're working with Amplify. We have people that have been cloud developers for like 10 years, and then we have people that have never used anything on the back end at all. So we have like we have all of these different types of people using it. So when I say complex or whatever, it just kind of depends on who you are as a developer, I think.
Definitely, definitely. But I think that's the nice thing of Amplify. It's so easy to get started that you can build. I have built in 30 minutes a super big application with search and all the CRUD applications. And it takes the longest because you need to do all the cloud operations, but it's just so fast to code it. But then it's very powerful when you can integrate it with all your existing backend. So it has these two sides of the simplicity, but also the depth. So
Yeah. I think like if I was going to say like the superpower of Amplify, if you're like an existing cloud developer, it's just the rapid prototyping aspect and the rapid development and the developer velocity you get up front. Like you just are able to just do all this stuff with just a few command line commands. And I guess if you kind of like understand what's going on under the hood, you could write all that cloud formation. But even then, it would probably take you a little bit longer. So you're just
oh
like,
yeah.
okay, I want these things, and here they are, and now I can use them. And I think like at first, that was really great, but it was limiting at first. Like the CLI just didn't support all that much stuff. But I think over the last couple of years, we've evolved it to where it does now allow you to stick with it. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of where we are right now, where people may or may not understand that, or they may or may not kind of view it in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's always this sort of two edges. Like it's too easy, so you can basically not understand anything and then live a life of not understanding, and that can drive for a lot of problems in the end. So but I still like that things are accessible for people, and then they can learn if they want.
Yeah,
I'm
I
always
mean,
in
if you're like
favor.
brand new, if you're brand new to this stuff, it is the CloudFormation period is just confusing. Like if you open up the CloudFormation, you've never seen it before, you're going to be like, what is going on? So that kind of is something we would like to address in some way. I don't really know, our exact approach, what it's going to be, but it could look something like a dashboard where you can configure that stuff and some type of GUI. It could be additional interface into our CLI. It could be even a different target for our compilation. It could be something like CDK or serverless framework. It could be like, so those are the three things we're kind of like looking at now because we want to address that for new developers that are not familiar with CloudFormation.
Yeah, but I still like that everything is at the end CloudFormation because you can always add more things or things that are not supported, or even if you get tired of Amplify,
like the ultimate escape hatch.
you're not tired. You're not tied to it because that's, I think, one of the most scary things of trying something new. Like I will build my prototype or I will start my startup with this, but what if? Then
Right.
in this case, you always have the CloudFormation, so no strings attached.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate escape hatch, and it's a valid concern. You don't want to be limited if you're building something for the real world. You want to be able to think about that one use case or that one chance that your app just takes off and you get 1 million or 1 billion users. You want to be able to scale that thing, and you don't want to have to start over.
Exactly, and I think Amplify is so new that it's a normal concern. Even it might turn into something amazing in the future, but people are always afraid, and having an escape option is good. And then I have another question about this production of Amplify in a production environment. It's quite normal that people have like an iOS app, an Android app, a web app, but most of the examples I have seen out there is like you build everything from CLI, like your backend and your front end all together. And what about these cases? What is a good take?
Yeah. I mean, I think most of, or actually really all of the services that you're going to be having, as part of Amplify, are going to be the types of services that you can actually use across multiple front ends. So let's take, for example, like GraphQL is actually made perfectly for this
Yeah.
because you have, you know, your your operations that are going to be kind of like, fetching data and creating items in your database. And the cool thing about GraphQL is like you only get, the data that you ask for, and therefore you're able to control the payload size. So let's think about a use case where you have a desktop application and you have a mobile application. This is very common, right? Or even
Yeah.
a mobile web app. You're going to
Exactly.
have different selection sets based on the device that you're running. But do you want to create these multiple APIs for each
No.
device? Yeah, exactly. You probably don't want to. So with GraphQL, you have the option of, okay, for the mobile app, I need less data. I only want to show maybe these views, and then they can drill down and we can get the broader data set. And with desktop, we want only to have like this larger data set and fetch it in this manner or whatever. And of course, so that's kind of like the service side. But like as far as like integrating that, what you would basically do is when you create an Amplify project now in the Amplify console, we give you kind of like a backend view of your app. And we also give you ways to bring that same backend down into front end environments. So let's say you create your initial project as a web app. You can go into the Amplify console and you can actually download that entire environment into any other front end application, and we kind of give you all of the tools and the resources to do that. And
Okay.
essentially, it's just like a copy and paste like command. So you just like as long as you have the CLI installed, you would just go into the dashboard, copy the command that you would need to pull that back down, and you would go into your other front end, run that, and now you have that entire backend environment, and you can
Oh,
actually
nice.
just start running your app there.
And
And
then I
then you
will
can
see
continue.
multiple front ends in my Amplify console then, or something
Well,
like that.
the front the amplified console isn't really going to be aware of
Okay.
more than one front end because as long as there's no difference as far as what is going on the service side, then it doesn't really matter. Um, I think that the one part that is something that we didn't support that well before that we do now is like, what if you make changes in one backend environment and you have like say 3 or 4 environments that are working? Let's say you have like a web app, a mobile app, and then maybe even like some other type of app. I don't know what that would be, a desktop app,
A TV,
um,
smart TV.
yeah, TV app. Let's say you make changes in this environment, you can actually pull down the most recent updates across all of the other projects. That way, they're all consistent, and you don't have any kind of
Okay.
inconsistencies
Interesting.
there.
Yeah, now I'm looking into a lot of these environments in Amplify. That's something I'm really trying to learn now because I see that it's quite powerful for the CI/CD perspective and how you can work with multiple teams and things like that. So it's something that I think it takes quite a lot of time to investigate because there is so many options and things that you can do. It's not as simple as just upload it to GitHub. No, no, no. You can build your whole pipeline of pull
Yeah,
requests and like I don't know feature branches and like you can get your testing feature branches published. I was just like, wow, this is super cool.
yeah. We added subdomains like earlier as well, so like you could have like a branch subdomain. So it would be something like feature one dot something, your website.com. And one of the cool use cases for that is for documentation versioning. So you could have like v1.amplifydocs.com, and that would be basically a branch, and then you would have like v2, v3, and that way you could actually have all of that stuff just handled for you without having to do like any work. All you need is the branches to be there.
Wow, that's super cool. Yeah, I think that part I think it's quite ignored in most of the basic demos, but then it's super powerful. So I recommend everybody to pay attention to the environment and all that because it takes so much time to make it by yourself when you want to integrate GitHub and your CI/CD pipeline and to get all these things and with Amplify it's just basically connect your GitHub repo and then make some branches.
Yeah, that's it. No, it's
So
definitely pretty simple.
yeah, I'm very happy with that. So now let's move a little bit in talking about GraphQL and Amplify CLI, there is these transforms, the at model, at key, at connection, and I would like to know what these transforms are. We can maybe give a brief explanation and then start going into depth in here.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to kind of go over just in concept is kind of like how does GraphQL fit into Amplify and AWS in general? And I think the main thing to kind of know, like if you're watching this, you probably are aware of this, but let's say you're not. It's just that AppSync is essentially a managed GraphQL service that AWS provides. And it's standalone, so you don't have to use Amplify with it. In fact, you could just build an AppSync API with CloudFormation or something. But what Amplify does provide though is additional tooling and stuff on top of what AppSync provides. But it's interesting because Amplify is a suite of open source tooling essentially, except for the console. All it really is just a CLI and a front end framework. But AppSync is an actual AWS service, something like Lambda or something, right? So what happens is that AppSync adds a feature, and then we have to kind of go and catch up with that feature because we don't have the ability to actually create all of this tooling around that new feature just yet because it just got released. Even though we're kind of in the same org, it's just hard to keep up with all the stuff going on. So what you're gonna notice is that sometimes AppSync is a little bit ahead of Amplify. So AppSync, for example, has caching, it has pipeline resolvers, and that support is coming from Amplify,
nice.
but it's not part of it just yet. But what we do offer though is the tooling that we do provide is actually really powerful. So sometimes people want the Amplify tooling in their serverless framework or in their CDK app, and then they actually are building some of the same tooling that we've created, just kind of into those other other tools.
I'm one of those. Since I discovered the transforms, I cannot build AppSync without Amplify because it makes so much simple to make the schemas. It was really this simple?
Yeah. It gives you just it's like if you're running a race and you get to be placed 100 yards from the finish line. That's kind of what the transforms do, I think.
Yeah, I think that they are my favorite feature because I'm not a front-end person, I'm a back-end person, and making these GraphQL schemas is very painful because you need to know all the cases and all the inputs and write so much text that is and with at model you get all these things.
Yeah. I mean, I have a little presentation that I'd like to just go over that kind of goes into this, but just real quick, what we're talking about, the GraphQL Transform library is just a set of directives that you add to a GraphQL schema that give you a bunch of additional functionality. And do you want me to go ahead and share my screen if I have a presentation to kind of go over real quick? This is going to be just maybe a 10-minute presentation, just kind of talking about the GraphQL Transform library. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Great. Okay, cool. Yeah. So this is actually part of a conference talk that I've given recently, and it's kind of just the bread and butter of what we were just talking about. So this is kind of a good overview, and this is going to give us kind of some starting point for a demo that I'm gonna do later as part of this recording. So what we basically are going to talk about is the GraphQL Transform library, and then to kind of understand why it's important to have this. Let's talk about a regular GraphQL API and what you would have to do to kind of get a GraphQL API built from scratch. And this kind of goes along with a similar philosophy of serverless in the sense that when possible, offloading to some type of managed service that is pay per compute, essentially, it makes a lot of sense in a lot of different occasions. So let's talk about that use case, but with GraphQL. Let's say that you wanted a GraphQL API and you were kind of managing your own infrastructure, and you have an EC2 instance, and you need to build that server and also kind of get it to where it needs to be for a production environment. There are three main parts essentially that are part of a GraphQL API. You have the schema, which is where you define your data types and also any operations that are going to be interacting with your data sources. So, for instance, creating and updating items and things like that would be part of the schema. And then you have your actual data sources as well. So you might have like a database for, NoSQL or a SQL database for those use cases. You might have an Elasticsearch data source. So you might have multiple data sources even. And then you would have your resolvers, which are essentially just like functions that map between the operations that you did define in your schema and your data sources.
Yeah.
So let's say you have like a to-do app, and you've defined a to-do type in your schema and like a get to-do query. The resolver would be the function that maps that get to-do operation to your data source.
Yeah.
So you're managing your own infrastructure, you're building your API, you create all of these things, your data sources, your schema, your resolvers. What you then need to start considering are security, authentication, authorization, stuff like that. Also scalability, and a lot of stuff that is like, particular, I guess, to GraphQL, stuff like malicious queries.
Yeah.
So, building all of this from scratch.
And GraphQL is an interesting thing because it sits between your backend and your client. So if it doesn't scale properly, it's like the perfect bottleneck to kill all your calls.
Yeah.
Because I managed many of these GraphQL services, and it was like, if you worry about the scalability of your microservices in the backend, but if your GraphQL doesn't respond, doesn't matter what is the scalability in your backend. So it's a very crucial part on the application.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and it becomes really, a lot of work, a lot of boilerplate code, but also a lot of expertise is actually involved in this, because even if you're like a very competent backend developer, when you're coming into like a kind of a newer technology like GraphQL, there's a lot of stuff that are just unknown. So I think for a lot of people, and I think a lot of that is around, security as far as DDoS attacks and malicious queries and stuff, but also getting authentication and authorization right, and thinking about stuff like relationships between different data types and, all the stuff that goes along with, everything that would typically be involved in a regular API, and addition to that, like how that applies to GraphQL. So like what AppSync does, it abstracts all of this away, just gives you kind of all of this package as a managed service with authentication, authorization, and all of this other stuff. But what you start then having to think about is like when you're building out this API, okay, you have your API up and running, and you have it secured and all this stuff, and let's say we're using AppSync, you have everything there. What you then start needing to do is thinking about a little bit more complex or real-world use cases, really, around things like many-to-many relationships, different data access patterns. So think about, if you've ever worked with DynamoDB, how would you take this table and map a bunch of different data access patterns against that table? Like, how would that translate into the GraphQL?
That is something I want to deep dive right now, because it's very, very interesting to see that in action in Amplify.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely let's make sure that we go over some of that stuff in the demo. Then, just whenever we get to that point, let's talk about some really cool use cases there.
Definitely.
And then there's just like really basic use cases, stuff like if you wanted to turn a GraphQL operation into a mapping to a Lambda function, which kind of is like gives you the ability to do anything. What if you wanted to take an existing HTTP endpoint and map that into a GraphQL operation? All these things are things that you might want to do. And what the GraphQL Transform library essentially does, it just kind of gives you all of this functionality and packages them into these directives that essentially kind of are deploying infrastructure as code into these little GraphQL directives. And what you can then do is you take the resulting, features that these will add, and you can either take them as they are and kind of use them, or you can modify them with your own business logic. So really, like, there's a couple of things going on with these directives. Let's take we're going to take a look at actually each of a few of these in depth. So let's wait until I get into those, so I don't confuse anybody.
No, we can follow your presentation. I'm just very excited about these transforms.
So, like, how do these work? Well, you just take your GraphQL schema and you add these directives and you decorate your schema. I'm basically saying, and then you have like this build step, which is going to be either a local mocking of your API or a deployment of your API via the Amplify CLI. And this is kind of the tooling that one of the things that kind of goes into that tooling category. And then what you end up with is your cloud infrastructure based on that schema that you've kind of created.
Yeah.
So let's kind of look at some of these directives in depth. We're going to look at like 4 of them or 5 of them maybe. The most basic and like really powerful one I would say
That's
is
really
the
powerful.
@model directive. Yeah, you've probably used this one I
Million
guess a lot.
times.
If you've used, okay.
That's amazing. With 5 letters and an @ you get so many things for free.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of the base of what a lot of the other stuff is actually going to be doing. You don't actually have to use this for a few of them, but for the most part, most of your types are going to have this @model directive. And what this basically allows you to do is take a base type and then scaffold out kind of a smart API based on this base type. So when you think of like most applications, you think of the operations that you might have against a piece of data. So let's say, for instance, I think the most basic app that we always talk about is To Do, because we kind of have a mental model of like what, we could then take using that To Do app and build other types of apps. So let's take a To Do app, and you want to have a way to create, read, update, delete, and maybe list to-dos. Well, you could take this @model and add it to a to-do type, or in this example, a product type.
Yeah.
And what we're going to scaffold out is we're going to have a create, read, update, delete, and list product operations created for this type. And then what we're going to also do is create a table, a product table. And then we're going to also create all of the resolvers that map between the database and all of those operations.
Yeah.
So just adding this @model will give you all of that stuff. So what you end up with is CRUD and list schema. You get your DynamoDB table, and then you get all of the GraphQL resolvers for that model. And what you end up doing a lot of times is you can actually run with this and go to production with it, and a lot of people do that. But you might even need some custom business logic in your resolver. And what you could just then do is just take that resolver that we've given you with all that boilerplate, and then just modify it to kind of meet the demands of your app.
Yeah. Or you can add new resolvers or do whatever you want, because it's
you can add custom resolvers, you can modify the existing resolvers, you can do kind of whatever you want. But like just getting started though, most apps have some type of CRUD and list functionality, so you're getting all of that pretty easily.
And you also get the subscriptions as well, and I think that's super cool.
Oh, and the subscriptions. Right, yeah, so real time is one of the big things with GraphQL, and you get all of the subscription definitions and the subscription functionality built out as well. So you'll have, I think it'll be on create product, on update, and on delete product. Okay, cool. So, and then the next one is @connection, which allows you to model out many-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many relationships. So let's take a post type that has many comments, and we want to map a comment to a post. So let's say, for instance, like I have a blog post and people comment on it. I want to be able to fetch that post and the related comments in a single GraphQL operation. Or I might just want to query the comments for an individual post in a single operation. So we need to have like that relationship. And to make that relationship happen, all we need to do is just add this @connection directive to the one-to-many relationship we'd like to have.
Nice.
And then that's it. Yeah, everything is, all of the resolvers and all of the data sources and everything are configured for you. So this one's really popular.
Yeah, that's very good.
And then the next one is the @auth directive, and this one allows you to enable authorization rules.
That's one of my favorites too. It's so simple to add authorization rules.
Yeah, this one's just extremely popular, and it's really powerful. And we're every day getting a lot of good feedback on it, and improving additional features and stuff to it too. So, but yeah, so let's say that you have a blog and you have like a post type. And what you would like to do would say, okay, I only want the person that created the post to be able to view the post, update, or delete it, which isn't that common of a use case, right? You probably want this to be viewed by other people, but let's just take this and we're going to build upon it. All you would need to do would be to add this @auth directive with whatever rules array that you would like. And for this single rule, it would just say allow owner. And this would only allow the owner of the post to be able to read, update, or delete. But what's really powerful about this is you can actually pass in an array of rules, because essentially most apps are going to need more complex stuff than this. So if you think about most apps, like Instagram, Twitter, Medium, or a blog, all of these have a very similar authorization pattern, actually, if you think about it. You want to be able to allow anyone to be able to read most of these posts, but you only want the owner to be able to make updates or deletions to those posts, right? If you think about an Instagram post or something like that. You can actually create this definition of roles pretty easily with the auth directive. We would just pass in another rule. We would say we want anyone to be able to read, but we only want the owner to be able to have these other rules of updating or deleting. Exactly. And there you have all of this functionality just kind of like built out for you.
And you can also have different groups or roles, what they are called in Amplify. Roles?
Oh, for group authorization?
Yeah, so if you have different categories of people.
Yeah, so you can also add group authorization by saying allow groups and passing in an array of groups. And that groups can be either like a hard-coded array, or it can actually be the result of a field on the type. So you might have like another field there that would say authorized groups, and that would be like an array of strings, and then you could resolve to that, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
And like essentially what's really going on here is that we're just taking these rules and we're building out resolvers based on those rules, and then the resolvers are really kind of where all this work is doing, or is happening, I guess you'd say.
And that's really tied up with Cognito.
Right. Yeah. This is very closely tied with Cognito. That's definitely something to keep in mind. But Cognito is becoming more and more common as an authorization type.
Oh yeah. But if you need to have the Cognito enabled as an authorization mechanism to see this happening, I think you cannot do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And what I've actually seen some people do, and we'd like to actually support this a little better. But like, let's say you have a different authorization provider. You can actually take the boilerplate that we're writing and kind of modify it slightly to work with other providers if you're working
without zero,
because
or
like
something
essentially
like that.
The logic, I mean the logic is the same. It's just more around the naming that is kind of Cognito specific, I would say.
Oh, cool.
Okay, cool. So the next one I guess we'll go over is the @function directive. Have you used this one yet?
Well, it creates a Lambda function in the backend, but I not really have used it much. Just for an example.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I haven't been using this one that much up until maybe 6 months ago.
Okay.
And then I started using it, and now I'm using it like all the time. So I would say check it out. It's pretty cool. And it does exactly, like what you just said. It just allows you to set up a Lambda function as a resolver, which basically is, the ultimate like resolver, because you can do anything in a Lambda function.
But I think Dynamo and AppSync are so powerful that in general I'm just happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, but like, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff that you might do, like interacting with like third-party, like another API, or just, I don't know, doing some, if you want to write JavaScript, you could do it this way. But yeah, this is cool because you can just take a Lambda function and just have it as the resolver, and anything that you return in the Lambda function is going to be the return value of this query. So like the return value here is an integer. So all you would need to do would have like this Lambda function run, and then whenever at the end of the function you return, it just needs to be like an integer, and this is gonna work fine.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
And then the one that we're gonna go at a demo over a bunch of these also, but I think this is gonna be one of the more interesting ones. This is the @key.
That's something that surprised me so much when I started digging into it, and how powerful it is to really optimize your application in a totally different level. So
yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's one of the ones that like is a little harder to get to grasp at first, and I think we're going to change the API a little bit to improve it to make it a little easier to read.
Yeah.
But the functionality is going to stay the exact same.
Okay.
But let's take a look at like a base type, like with just an at model. When you create this type with this at model, you're going to get two query access patterns. You're going to be able to get inventory by ID, and you're going to be able to list all of the inventory. But this is going to limit you in the sense that you can't have any other basic access patterns without doing what is essentially a scan and then a filter. Yeah. You might want something like more performant, which is a DynamoDB query. Yeah. So let's say we wanted to query inventory by warehouse ID. That seems like it would be a pretty common access pattern. How would you model that with GraphQL Transform? Well, what we would do, we would add the @key directive. And what you can do is you can define, well, first of all, you would take the field that you would like to query on. And in this example, we're saying we want to query on the warehouse ID field. And what we're saying is like, okay, we want to basically call a function, pass in the warehouse ID, and get all of the inventory for that warehouse ID. To create that access pattern, we would pass in a name key, a query field, and a fields array. The name is just the DynamoDB global secondary index, and I think this is something we're going to remove because this doesn't really matter for us.
It's not needed.
Yeah, it's not needed, right? It's kind of confusing too if you're not familiar with DynamoDB. Yeah. So really the main things to look at here are like the fields array and the query field. Let's look at the query field though. This is actually going to be a new GraphQL query that we're just going to generate for you. So you're going to be able to say, I want to query items by warehouse ID, passing in the ID as the argument. And the fields array is basically going to say the first field is going to be the index that you like to query on, or the field that you like to query on, and then you can have a second optional argument, which would be the sort key.
Exactly.
And I think we can improve this honestly a little better as well. We might say instead the primary key and the sort key.
Yeah, because I think fields, it leaves you the idea that you can put many things, but it's at the end of the day, it's only two.
Yeah, yeah, for the most part, like I would say 99.9% of people just use two.
Yeah.
But you could use more, but all you would basically be doing would be creating like a complex query. But yeah, so that's basically it. Yeah. You can add as many of these keys as you would like. So you might add like a half dozen if you have that many access patterns you'd like for a big, a massive type.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those features that make this Amplify AppSync totally production ready, because then you can really make your application optimize into really taking advantage of the features of Dynamo and be fast and performant and scalable, and not just doing scans in a table that is very not efficient.
Right. Yeah. There's all kinds of cool stuff I've seen people doing with that, because you can actually combine @connection and @key to have the resolution of a field array be like hitting that DynamoDB index to get that array query. That's a little bit outside the domain of what we're going to cover, but we have it covered in the docs. So
that's super good.
And then we have the @HTTP, which is similar to the function in the sense that it's kind of like allowing you to have an escape hatch. So let's say you have like a microservice architecture. You can either use the function or the @HTTP to kind of interact with another third-party HTTP endpoint. And this is just a really simple way to kind of say, okay, I want to have a way to query or make mutations to an existing endpoint. You could just add this @HTTP GraphQL Transform.
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, if you can remove layers in your application, why to use a function that will call an HTTP if you can call it from your AppSync? I think is better.
Yeah, this is like the ultimate API gateway, because at this point, there's no reason to have an HTTP endpoint anywhere, because everything can go through GraphQL, which gives the front end layer a very, very nice, clean, consistent API.
Exactly.
And yeah, so it's really, if you combine all these, you pretty much have no excuse to have an HTTP call from your front end, other than a GraphQL request.
Well, but that you don't see if you're using the libraries.
Right. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is like have like a challenge where we kind of build out an API,
Good.
and then the API we want to have a schema, resolvers, DynamoDB table, relationships, so one-to-many relationships, and auth rules.
Good.
Okay, cool. So I think what we'll do now is I'll exit this presentation and we'll do some live coding. Is that cool?
Yay, code.
Okay, cool. All right. Basically what I'm in right now is an Amplify project. And if you look at the status of this project, the only thing I have right now is Auth. So I think it would be cool to kind of just add that API and model out some of those things using like @connection, @key, @auth, and all that stuff. So I'll go ahead and add a new API with Amplify add API. Choose GraphQL. I'll just give the API name of FooBar.
Good.
And then we have, is that a good name?
Yes.
And then we have like the default authorization type. So with AppSync, you can have multiple authorization types, and you basically kind of have a default, and you have additional authorization types built on top of that default. And what this basically just means is like if you're calling this from a client application and you don't specify the authorization type, it's just going to fall back to this default, which kind of allows you to have public access and private access, similar to kind of that use case of Instagram or Twitter that we were talking about earlier. So I think for the default, I'll just choose public, and then I will choose a public is the name of the API key, give it an expiration date, and then I'll also choose yes to advanced settings because I want to add an additional authorization type. So I'll choose yes to configure auth types, and I'll choose Amazon Cognito user pool as the other auth type. If I wanted to have on the front end some type of offline use case, if we were using the offline SDKs, I would have the option to configure conflict detection, but I don't think we want that. We're just working with the API. And if I had a schema, I could reference that here, but I don't. So I'm just going to start from scratch and use one of the boilerplates that we offer. And I'll just choose yes to edit the schema.
Yeah, I think that boilerplate, you should have an option like, I just need to see my schema now. Because I always go through this road and then change this.
Yeah, you're like, yeah. I think it would be cool to say, do I have a schema already created?
Yeah. An AppSync schema.
And like instead of referencing the location, actually, I don't know. Yeah. I see what you're saying there. So I think I'm going to model something similar to what I was doing in that, presentation.
Yeah.
So we'll have a post type and a comment type. And I think the things that we want to talk about is we wanted to kind of demo @model. Of course, that's kind of the base use case where you have the schema, resolvers, subscriptions. But we wanted to do a little bit more complex stuff. So let's start off with just giving some fields, I guess, so we can take that and go from there.
Can you make 1 or 2 points bigger the code?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's
Is
better.
this okay here?
That's better. I'm a little blind.
No worries. So I guess for the post type, we'll have like content is like a string or something like that, and then for the comment, we'll have a message.
And what about? I imagine in the post you will have an author that will be your maybe Cognito user. Do you need to put it there, or it comes automatically?
Yeah, we can do that. So we could say author, and this could be like a string. And by default, we could, you would assume, okay, you would have to pass this in as an argument. What we can actually do that we'll show in just a second is that we'll be able to reference automatically off of the JWT of the caller, the sub, which is kind of like the unique ID of the person that made the request. Yeah. So it's a lot more secure that way.
And also easier.
So yeah, and it's easier because you just have one less field to fill in. So like on the post type, let's talk about actually something a little simpler at first. Let's talk about like if we wanted to have an array of comments. Again, all we would have to do is just add this @connection, and this is automatically going to give us that relationship between comments and posts.
And that means that it will create an operation for us that we can get the comments for a post.
It will give us the option to create a, well, it'll do two things. It will give us a new field that is like an argument to a create comment that is going to allow us to pass in the ID of the post.
Okay.
And then from there, it'll also give us an additional field on the query for posts that will have associated comments. So those two things will be kind of added.
Nice.
Okay, so the thing we wanted to do though is we want to have some auth rules. So let's go ahead and just use the @auth directive. And then here you would just pass in an array of rules. So you would say something like that. And then from here you would kind of define all of the rules. And let's think about something like a Medium blog or like a WordPress blog. There are really actually three types of authorization. You're going to have people that are completely public. They've never signed into the app at all. You're going to have people that are signed in, which are going to basically be, just any user that is part of your system. And then you're going to have the owner of the person that created a post. So we're going to define all three of those rules here. So the first one is going to be allow owner. And this is going to be, it's going to automatically take the person that created this post and pass in essentially their user ID into the database. And we can now reference that here by saying we want to specify the owner field. So I can say, and then I can pass in a string here of author.
Oh.
And this is going to allow us to, or it's actually going to automatically pass in that field here. So, and we left it, like if you see an exclamation point, it means it's
mandatory.
It's not nullable or it's required.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do that because when we create this, we're not passing it in. So we want to make sure that that still works.
Yeah. That's kind of annoying when you put things that are mandatory that you don't.
Yes. And then we want to also allow public access, but we want to make sure that they only are able to read. So we can actually just pass in an operations array. And this is going to be read. So this is going to allow anyone to kind of just create queries against the posts. And then the last one we want to do is we want to allow people that are signed in, but that are not the owner to also read. And that basically all we have to do is say allow private. And then operations are also going to be read.
And what if we want to allow this private to do comments?
So they would then we would have to define rules on the comment.
Okay.
Right. And actually, let's take this rules array and actually apply it also.
Because that's quite a use case, very normal in blogs. You can watch, but you can only comment if you are registered, for example.
I think this should be the same thing because I guess you could say you want the owner to be able to maybe modify their comments. You want anyone to be able to read comments, and that would be a similar.
Well, maybe they need to create. The private needs to have the permission to create.
The private. So that would be the same as this field here.
Ah, okay. That will be the owner of the comment.
Right. Yeah. Because I think if we used allow private and we allowed them to create, I don't think it would pass in the owner field. I think that's the main difference.
Yeah.
But I'll actually need to check into more into that actually.
Don't worry. I like to ask random questions.
I guess we could say the owner field is also the same, like owner field, it's like string, something like that. I think that should work. We might have to go modify this, but we'll test it out.
Live coding.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so let's think about this. So, like, what would we want to do? Like, that we might want to have another access pattern. So, let's say we want to categorize a post, or something like that. So maybe we would allow someone to have a category.
Yeah.
And this would be like a string. And this would allow us to kind of have a query that gets post by category or something like that. Okay, cool. So let's do that. And then the last thing we want to do is create the @key definition for that. So let's do @key. And we want to pass in a fields array. And we want to have a query field. It's a string. And I think we want to say the name. And this is going to be a string as well. So the fields that we want to query on are the category. So we could just
put it there.
Do that. And then the query field might be something like
post by category.
That's perfect. Let's do that. And then the name, I don't know, post index, because this is going to be the GSI that's created, level secondary.
I think if you never use Dynamo and somebody tells you the GSI, it sounds like Chinese. So
I know, it sounds like very technical. But essentially, this is going to be like a new partition key that you're able to just query against, essentially. Okay, cool. So we've written a lot of code. Let's see if any of this works, though. So like what we can do is, so there's two things that we're going to need to find out. Is this a valid GraphQL schema?
That's the first question.
And then if so, like we want to test it out and make sure the actual syntax and stuff is right.
Can we do that not the syntax, local? Without?
Yeah, we're going to do it locally.
Nice.
So let's go ahead and hit continue and see if this works. And if it does, if it's a valid schema, you'll just get this message, which is a good sign.
Okay, good. So that's good. First step done.
And I think what I might do is like in the background, I might deploy this in just a second, but let's first mock it. So to test it out locally, you can just run Amplify mock, and this will mock your entire app. So if you have storage, if you have an API, it should mock everything. If you only want to mock your API, though, you could say Amplify mock API, and that would also work. So what's happening is that it created a table for posts and a table for comments, and then it's going to do some GraphQL code generation. So it's just going to basically, let's say we had like a React or a JavaScript app, we could use this code generation to like call queries and mutations.
Yeah, I love that code generation because I'm always very lazy. So.
Me too. So like I just accepted the defaults. It's just pretty basic stuff. So what's going to happen is that it'll give us like this HTTP endpoint. So let's test that out. And what we have here, let me zoom in a lot. Is a graphical explorer, which is basically kind of like if you've ever used Postman, it's basically like
Postman for GraphQL.
Yeah, exactly. And then while that's running, let's go ahead and deploy this back in by running Amplify push. Okay, so
I just learned that if you do --yes, you don't need to go through all the accepting.
Yeah, you don't have to answer any questions anymore. That's it.
I will use that.
It's a hack. So the cool thing about this is, let me close that part because you can actually see up here where you have like history, you have Explorer, you have update auth, which allows you to kind of set your API key or who you are. If you're using a user pool, you could say username and groups. And this allows you to really easily mock out like different authorization patterns and stuff. So I think the first thing we might want to do is go to API key and see if we can break it by creating something, because we shouldn't be able to create anything because we're a public user. So I'll do a mutation. Is this okay, or do you want me to zoom in?
I think the size is okay. You can keep it like that.
So I'm going to do mutation, create, post.
This is nice because it auto-completes, so you don't need to remember.
Yeah, I can just type any letter and just like, okay, Z, and it's just
see what it's
even though there's no Z.
Yeah.
So for the post, I think we had like a content, and this is going to be hello world or something. And then I think we had a category.
Oh yeah, we had the category.
This is going to be like serverless or something.
For example. Let's see.
And I think that's it. So we'll try that out. And we should not be able to do it. So that works. So we should now be able to instead, let's change into user pool access, and we'll update our auth, and I'll just sign in as like Dabit3 and create a new token, JWT. And let's actually also return the owner or author.
Yeah, so we can see it.
This is going to be, yeah, because we're not passing it in, but it should read off of the JWT. So let's try that out.
Oh, that was fast.
So we have an ID return, a category, content, and author, which is all cool. So what we're going to do is next create a comment. And we want to, well, let's create one more post, I guess, just so we have multiple in there. So content is like, and then I might have a different category of Amplify.
So then we can search.
Yeah. And then we'll do like,
yay.
YouTube or something.
Good.
All right, so we have 3 different categories, 3 different posts. I guess we'll do one more for YouTube. That way we can just demonstrate the different searching stuff on the GSI. So my other favorite is Kilo Loco.
Oh yeah, he's really cool. If you don't know him, I'll leave you the link in the description box.
He's also on YouTube, so we'll just add him there.
And you just hired him, so.
Yeah, he's on my team. So what I want to do is let's go ahead and query for like all the posts, so we can get so we can have the IDs and use those to create comments.
And you're the owner of all the posts, so.
Good point.
Maybe you need to have another user or something that they can.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Let's query for these, and then we might switch users.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me update the auth, and then I'll sign in as, is it Marcia?
Yeah, that's my name.
Marcia. And I'll take an ID off of like maybe this post here.
Yeah.
And I want to create a comment on that post. So I'll create a new mutation. And we're going to have a new field that we didn't actually create, but it's going to be there, and it's going to be post comments ID. And this is going to be like the relationship between the post and the comment. And all we need to do is just pass in the ID of the post there.
Yeah, and then some message.
And then I'll also
have the owner, I think. Yeah, owner.
So this should be Marcia, so let's give this a shot.
Let's see.
Great comment. Ooh, owner field is null for some reason. Let's take a look at our schema.
Oh, because you have it as author in the definition.
Yeah, so let's change this to author. And guess I can. When we save that, actually, and you go back to the CLI, you should see that it actually ran the code gen again and regenerated everything. So you don't have to really do anything. It should automatically do that. We just probably want to refresh here just to make sure.
That's nice.
This all works. So now the owner field is actually not
it's
proper. It should be author. So let's. I don't want to do that again. Let me try to query. Let's actually query the post and the comments. So let's try that now. So now here under posts, we should have comments.
Let's see.
And I'm not sure if that relationship is going to work, considering we messed it up. Oh shoot. Okay, good. It's not going to let me do that.
Let's see.
Oh, there we go. It did work.
Wow, that's cool.
So we have that relationship like working on that query. So now we don't actually have to kind of like list all the comments and make the relationship. It's there in that query.
Yeah, that's super powerful.
So I guess the next thing we might want to do is query
the post by category.
And then here we can pass in the category.
Yeah. We have Serverless, YouTube, and what else? Amplify.
So we'll just go ahead and look for the post with YouTube. And then we get those with Amplify.
That's the comment that you just added.
And another thing we might want to do to make this even more powerful is what if we wanted to kind of have a way to search by category or something like that, right? That would be like the next step, I think, in evolve. So what we can do is we can actually go back here and in the second like argument here, we can actually pass in another. So we might want to say we want to get the category, and we want to be able to find maybe by the author of the post. So like, let's say that I guess Marcia or Nader or something like that would be make sense. So let's say, what is it, the author? So if I save that, I think we might need to go back and see what's going on here, because if it's going to compile successfully, it'll tell us. But sometimes when you're messing around with those GSIs, you kind of have to remove your database and just restart it. But it looks like everything works. So let's try this. Let's try this again. So let me refresh and see what's going on here.
So this
we should be able to go
still has all your data before.
So we should be able to pass the author. We should be able to say like equals.
Yeah, and I think using this key, for example, is a great way to, if you find a way that you can do search without using Elasticsearch. Because Elasticsearch, for me, it always breaks the serverless kind of idea. Then
exactly, yeah.
And if you use the key and you create like a secondary, like this sort key, then you can do queries like contains, so many different operations in there. So you can perform some kind of search. It's maybe not as in detail as what you can do with Elasticsearch, but it's quite good for basic cases, and you don't need to have this easy to running with your Elasticsearch.
Yeah, I agree. I hope they come up with the serverless Elasticsearch.
We are all hoping for the same.
I think that like because we kind of mess around with those GSIs, we need to just like refresh our database. So I'm going to go to my server, and I'm going to go ahead and if you look in the Amplify folder, you'll see that we have a mock data. And if you want to ever delete that, you can just go back there and just say Amplify mock data. And then we'll run Amplify mock again, and then we'll start over.
And sometimes when you are playing with the GSIs, they don't propagate the old changes, so you need to kind of add more data, so then it propagates in the GSI, the new data.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a post, and let's just see who we're signed in as. So we need to sign in, and we're signed in as Marcia. That sounds good. Make sure that we have that token. So I'll go ahead and create a post.
Good. It's category YouTube.
I'll make maybe Amplify. So
it's always hardest to come up with text for your text tests.
So now we can, we can say, Marcia, we should be able to have this query work. There we go. And then we can have a category of Amplify.
And these operations that are being performed are really efficient. So they scale very well. So you don't need to worry too much about the performance of your application, because it's going to these indexes. So I think that makes it super great. But then I think it takes, in order to make it very performant, it takes to know a little bit of Dynamo, so you can understand how the partitions are created and not to put everything under one partition, because that's quite normal that like people, I don't know, use category product and everything is a product. So then everything in the index will be stored in one big partition, and then you will be losing the efficiency of Dynamo if you have millions of products. So, but
so basically we're doing like queries against the sort key. So
Yeah.
we have like we did equals, and now we're doing begins with. So
Exactly.
like you can do search essentially with this, and
Exactly.
like I think the thing that people ask is like, what if you do uppercase? So like, what if we did M
It should
like
work.
with uppercase? Still working.
Yeah. The sort key analysis is quite good.
Yeah.
And if you put
So
I
that's
think
it, yeah.
Marcia, then it should appear the same result, even if you're using begins with. So you can do like a kind of free text search in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
The one thing I wish it had was contains for strings. I don't think it has that, does it?
well, sort
No, I don't
keys
think it has.
in Dynamo has it. I don't know if it's implemented in this, but
Yeah, I think that we need that, because if we
Yeah.
had that, that would be pretty cool.
yeah, I'm pretty sure there is contains in the sort keys for the Dynamo operations, but that's something that will be very powerful. Then you can do very free text search. Yeah. But yeah, this is super
Cool. Yeah, I
cool.
mean, I think that's kind of it on the actual like demo side.
And
There's one app that you mentioned earlier, and it's the voting app. So I think if you want to try that out, it's actually running on thisorthat.cloud.
yeah. And this comes to my
And this,
last question for you. And
yeah,
I will leave your GitHub repo in the description box and the link for this app as well, because I think there you have so many demos and things that people can try out on these topics. But I think one of my last questions is about these subscriptions, because this and that is this app built on real-time subscriptions. And I got so many questions of people asking, what is the limit that AppSync can take on subscriptions?
yeah. So that's like a hard question to answer, to be completely like straightforward. I think by default we have a limit, and that limit can actually be lifted for your
It's
use
a
case.
soft
So I
limit.
mean, it's hard to say that there is.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's a soft limit.
Yeah.
But to give you an idea, like we out of the box tested this app without raising any of the limits, with like I think we did like 1 million updates within a few minutes or something like that. And the subscriptions actually propagated down to the client 100% consistently. So we had like, this is a real-time app, so I can actually open up this in another window and do something like this. I can show you what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So like if I drill down into this, well, actually I don't even have to do that. I can actually just test this out here.
Yeah.
And you'll see that it comes there. Or if I drill down here and I do that, then you'll see that it also works.
Exactly.
So we basically hit that up with like 1 million requests, and everything still worked consistently. Not only did it not break, it actually worked perfectly across clients. So like the you will have probably in a really massive scale app the situation where you might run into those limits, but I would say most of the time that we don't really have our production customers running into those, and if they do, they can just request an increase.
Yeah. And I think maybe the question can be on how if you have too many subscriptions in your server and your client application is ascribed to all of that, then you might have a performance issue on your client, because it might be receiving messages all the time, and maybe that's something you want to avoid. And be selective.
There's a lot of things that go on at that scale. Like if you have thousands of subscriptions coming in to your client app within a minute, you might rethink of the architecture of that client. Like, if you're building like a real-time stock monitoring dashboard, something like that, it's possible, but there's still possibly better ways to handle that. Subscriptions are really great for things like messaging, things like that.
Yeah.
But if, let's say you need to refresh, thousands of different types of data, like multiple times per minute, unless it depends on it being exactly real time, then you might consider something like a query like every n seconds, which is going to be, even if you hit it 60 times per minute,
exactly,
it's still probably going to be cheaper.
And I think in the case here, it's not the question if the cloud can take it, but if it's your clients can take it.
Exactly.
The cloud can take it.
Exactly.
Don't worry. Just hit it. But can your client take 1 million requests per second? Maybe it's not the most efficient way. So I think that's a question that maybe in the old times when we needed to scale our GraphQL servers, it's really important how much subscriptions and things like that. Now with the cloud, that's no problem, but in your client still we have the limitations. And also the nice thing of GraphQL is that you make one request and you are really efficient with the battery and blah, blah, blah. And subscriptions help for doing that, so you reduce the polling. But if you are all the time throwing things into it, you are kind of killing your poor client application. So
That's true.
It's something to be very mindful on the client's resources, because I don't know, sometimes when you're testing in Wi-Fi, in a good internet, in a nice office, and that your clients are using their phone on a mobile, in a paid, I don't know, not free tier of internet. So you have to be very careful on how much resources you're consuming and how much battery you're draining. So that's my take on subscriptions. Be mindful when you're using them. Not for the cloud, but for your clients.
And I guess like one last thing we can do is like just go to Amplify console, because if you may be very familiar with this. It could be brand new to you. Either way, I'll just show you like that once you deploy all this stuff, it's all visible in a dashboard with all the different features that are enabled. So like right now, the only thing we've enabled is authentication and API. So we could like go to API and we can either open the app in AppSync, or we can go to the data sources and see those in DynamoDB as well. So
yeah,
I guess I would figure I'd just show that. I don't think we need to go into like doing the operations there, because they're going to be just like what we did locally, except they'll just be in the AppSync dashboard.
Exactly, and I think it's nice that you can show the local tool as well, because it's something I have not covered yet, and a lot of people ask, can I test it locally?
Yeah.
So you can.
Yeah, I'm glad that my demo did not break today.
Good. Yeah, so I think we are done for today. We have a nice demo, and I asked you as many of the questions that I got from the audience. So if you want to ask questions to my next guest, you can always find them in the community tab. I will leave there who I'm interviewing next, and you can ask questions as you asked for Nader, and I think I asked most of them, so good. So thank you very much for showing all this information, and it was great that you had a demo and everything. So
Yeah, I really enjoyed being here. I love talking about all this stuff, and if you ever have in the future another opportunity, I'd love to come back.
Oh yeah, I have so many questions about Amplify.
Yeah, maybe we can cover something different next
Data
time.
store.
Maybe Auth or data store. There we go. Data store. We're about to add. We're about to release a few new features for data store. So once we get data store polished up a little more, let's do that.
Good, because that's in my list of things I need to investigate.
Awesome.
So I save some time and I delegate all the investigation to you.
That sounds good.
Yes. Where people can find you? You have a YouTube channel and you have been posting some videos lately, so that's one place.
My YouTube is just YouTube/user/Nader Dabit or /u/Nader
Don't worry,
Dabit.
everything is in the box.
Yeah, you can just Google Nader Dabit on YouTube, and then it's actually like 3 different URLs I have now for some reason. I think because I signed up with YouTube so long ago. And then like my Twitter would be probably the place that I spend the most time, just because I have a lot of communication there with developers and stuff. And I'm Dabit3 on Twitter. It's DABIT and the number 3.
So if they have questions, Twitter is the best place to reach out.
I think so.
That's good.
Yeah.
So we will leave that there. And I also will leave your GitHub repo, because I think you have so many things in there that are really good. I go there every often to check how to do things.
Yeah, the voting app that I showed is open source there, along with dozens of other apps, just random stuff.
Exactly. So that's where I put all in the description box, so people can go and check you out. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah.
And we will have you again then for Data Store.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you too. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. That was the video for today. I hope you like it. If you did, give a big thumbs up. And remember, in the description box, you will find all the links and everything that we have gone through today. And let me know in the comment box below who I should interview next, what topics should I cover, and all that, because I'm always looking for people that you are interested or content that you are interested in. And I see you in the next episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!